200 years is a long time to remember a debt. Most species forget. They write the favor into their history books, teach it to their children for a generation or two, and then let it fade. Memory is expensive. Gratitude is heavy. It is easier to move forward without carrying the weight of what others have done for you. The Virati did not forget. Ambassador Dren stood in the center of the Galactic Council chambers, his silver scales catching the light from 1,000 floating screens. He was old now, older than most of his kind ever lived. His joints ached. His eyes had grown cloudy. But his memory remained sharp, because some things cannot be forgotten. No matter how much time passes, he remembered being a child. He remembered the smell of death in the air. He remembered watching his mother's skin turn gray as the hollow rot consumed her from inside. And he remembered the humans. The council chamber was filled with representatives from 47 species. They sat in rising tiers around a central platform, watching, whispering, calculating. The Mordane Empire occupied the highest seats, their dark red armor gleaming. The Remnari crystals pulsed with soft light. The hollow people floated in their containment spheres, their gaseous bodies swirling with colors that meant nothing to solid beings. At the center of it all stood a single human. His name was David Okoye. He was tall for his species, with dark skin and gray hair at his temples. He wore no armor, carried no weapons. He stood alone before the most powerful assembly in the galaxy, and he did not look afraid. Counselor Wrath of the Mordane Empire leaned forward. His voice echoed through the chamber like grinding stone. You have requested an audience with the full council. This is unusual. Humanity has no outstanding treaties, no pending disputes, no territorial claims before us. Why are you here? David Okoye smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad. I am here to collect a debt. Silence fell over the chamber. Debts between species were serious matters. Wars had been fought over less. Wrath's eyes narrowed. What debt? To whom? Ambassador Dren felt his heart's beating faster. He knew. Even before the human spoke again, he knew. 212 years ago, David said, the Virati homeworld was dying. A plague called the Hollow Rot was killing your people by the millions. Every species in this galaxy declared you contaminated. They closed their borders. They refused your calls for help. They left you to die. The chamber remained silent. Many of the younger delegates had never heard this story. The Virati did not speak of it often. Survival leaves scars that take centuries to heal. One ship came, David continued. A human medical frigate called the Hopeful Dawn. 47 doctors and scientists. They broke quarantine. They landed on your world. They worked for 3 months in conditions that killed 18 of them. And they found a cure. Ambassador Dren closed his eyes. He could still see their faces. The human woman who had held his hand while his mother died. The human man who had carried him to safety when the hospital collapsed. The human doctor who had synthesized the cure from her own blood, knowing it would kill her. Before they left, David said, their captain asked for one thing in return. A favor, to be collected when humanity needed it most. He paused and looked directly at Ambassador Dren. Humanity needs it now. Counselor Wrath laughed. It was not a kind sound. A favor? You come before the Galactic Council to call in a favor from 2 centuries ago? What could you possibly want that is worth such a gesture? David Okoye did not look at Wrath. He kept his eyes on Dren, and there was something in them that the old Virati recognized. Desperation, hope, fear. The same things Dren had felt as a child, watching his world die around him. Earth's sun is failing, David said. Our star is dying. We have 40 years before it collapses completely. Our planet, our home, the place where humanity was born, will be destroyed. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A dying star was not unusual. Species relocated. They built new homes. They adapted. We have a plan, David continued. We want to capture a young star from the outer rim, one with no inhabited systems nearby. We want to transport it across 400 light years. We want to place it where our sun once burned. The murmurs turned to gasps, then to laughter, then to shouts of disbelief. Impossible, Wrath thundered. Moving a star? The energy required would drain 100 worlds. The gravitational disruption could tear apart entire sectors. This is madness. David waited for the noise to die down. Then he spoke again, quietly. We are not asking the council for permission. We are not asking for approval. We are asking the Virati to honor a debt that was paid in human blood. Ambassador Dren stood. His old bones protested. His heart raced. Around him, the council fell silent, waiting. He thought of the 18 humans who had died on his world. He thought of Dr. Lena Okoye, David's ancestor, who had asked for nothing but a promise. He thought of the words she had spoken before the last human ship left Virati space. One day, humanity will ask something of you. When that day comes, remember what we gave. He had remembered. For 212 years, he had remembered. The Virati will honor the dead, he said. His voice was old but steady. We will help humanity move a star. The chamber erupted in chaos. But Dren ignored it. He walked down from his seat and stood beside David Okoye. And for a moment, he was a child again, holding a human hand in the darkness while his world burned. Thank you, David whispered. Dren looked at him with ancient eyes. You should know something. When we touch the fabric of space at this scale, other things will notice. Old things. Things that do not like to be disturbed. David nodded slowly. We know, but we have no choice. Dren placed a scaled hand on the human's shoulder. Then we faced them together, as your people once faced death with us. Outside the chamber's great windows, the stars burned cold and distant. And somewhere in the darkness between them, something ancient began to stir. There is a particular kind of silence that follows impossible words. It is heavy. It presses down on the chest. It makes breathing difficult and thinking even harder. The Galactic Council had experienced many kinds of silence over the centuries. The silence after declarations of war. The silence after peace treaties. The silence after the death of great leaders. But this silence was different. This was the silence of beings trying to understand something that should not be real. Moving a star. Counselor Wrath was the first to recover. He slammed his armored fist against his seat, and the sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. This is insanity. The Virati cannot commit resources to such foolishness without council approval. Ambassador Dren turned to face him. Despite his age, despite his weakness, there was steel in his voice. The Virati are a sovereign species. Our debts are our own. We do not require your permission to honor them. Wrath's face twisted with anger. And when this madness destabilizes the sector, when gravitational waves tear apart shipping lanes, when colonies are destroyed by the ripples of your arrogance. David Okoye stepped forward. We have calculated the risks. The star we intend to move is in an empty region of space. The path we will take avoids all inhabited systems. The gravitational effects will be contained. Calculated. Wrath spat the word. Humanity has been a spacefaring species for less than 1,000 years. You are children playing with forces you do not understand. Perhaps, David said quietly. But children learn. And we have had good teachers. The council dissolved into argument. Species shouted at each other across the chamber. Ancient alliances cracked under the pressure of this unprecedented request. Some supported the Virati's right to honor their debts. Others demanded intervention to prevent what they called cosmic vandalism. Through it all, David stood silent. Later, in a private chamber far from the noise, Ambassador Dren found him sitting alone. The human's shoulders were bent. His hands covered his face. For the first time, he looked not like a diplomat, but like a man carrying an impossible weight. They will not help, David said without looking up. The council will debate for months. Years. By the time they reach a decision, it will be too late. Dren sat beside him. His old bones settled with a soft crack. The council has always been slow. It is the price of consensus. We do not have time for consensus. David finally raised his head. His eyes were red. My daughter was born on Earth. She is 4 years old. She asks me about the flowers in our garden and the birds that visit our window. How do I tell her that by the time she is grown, all of it will be ash? Dren was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Tell me about your son. Tell me how this happened. David let out a long breath. 1,000,000 years ago, before humanity existed, another civilization lived in our region of space. They fought a war. They used weapons that we still do not fully understand. One of those weapons was used near our sun. It did not destroy it then. It planted something inside it. A kind of decay that would not activate for 1,000 millennia. And now it has activated. Yes, our scientists discovered it 30 years ago. They have tried everything to stop it. Nothing works. The decay is quantum level. It is rewriting the fundamental structure of our star. David's voice cracked. It is dying because of a war that ended before our ancestors climbed down from the trees. Dren closed his eyes. He understood now. This was not arrogance. This was not pride. This was desperation. The same desperation his people had felt 2 centuries ago, when death came from nowhere and no one would help. The Virati alone cannot move a star, he said carefully. We have technology. We have resources. But not enough. You will need more allies. David nodded slowly. I know. But who will help? You saw the council. They think we are mad. The council is not the galaxy. Dren leaned closer. In 200 years, humanity has touched many lives. You are young and loud, and sometimes foolish. You make mistakes. You rush into situations without thinking. But you also do something that most species have forgotten how to do. What is that? You help. Without calculation. Without expecting payment. You see someone suffering, and you reach out your hand. Dren placed his own hand on David's shoulder. There are species in this galaxy who remember that hand. Find them. Remind them. And perhaps you will find that you have more friends than you know. David looked at him for a long moment. Then something shifted in his eyes. The desperation did not disappear, but it was joined by something else. Determination. Who should I start with? Dren smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in many years. The Remnari. 40 years ago, a human mining crew found a Remnari child cluster trapped in a collapsed asteroid. They could have left it. The rescue was dangerous, and the Remnari were strangers. But they stayed. They dug for 18 hours. They saved 37 young Remnari lives. I did not know that story. Your people do not keep track of such things. But the Remnari do. Dren stood, his joints protesting. Come, I will help you find the others. The Hollow people, who were saved by human linguists. The Taith, who were shown mercy in war. The Kalori, who were fed when their harvests failed. Species after species, all with memories of human kindness. David rose beside him. Why do we do all of this? We barely had enough for ourselves in those years. Dren laughed softly. I asked your ancestor the same question 2 centuries ago. Do you know what she said? What? She said, we were not keeping score. The old Virati shook his head in wonder. I have lived a very long time, human. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species conquer and be conquered. But I have never met anyone who gives as freely as your kind. It is strange. It is dangerous. And it may just save your world. They walked together toward the chamber's exit, 2 representatives of species that should have had nothing in common, united by a debt that was never supposed to be collected. Behind them, through the great windows of the council chamber, a distant sun burned steadily. In 40 years, it would be gone. But somewhere in the galaxy, a replacement was waiting to be found. The only question was whether the universe would allow humanity to take it. Kindness is a strange thing to build an empire on. Most civilizations are built on conquest, on trade, on military might. They expand through force and maintain power through fear. History remembers the strong. History rewards the ruthless. But sometimes, history is wrong. David Okoye spent 3 months traveling from world to world, station to station, seeking allies for an impossible mission. He expected rejection. He expected laughter. He expected to return to Earth with nothing but apologies. He did not expect what he found. The Remnari homeworld was a planet of living crystal. Great spires rose from the surface, singing with frequencies that most species could not hear. The Remnari themselves were beautiful and cold, beings of glass and light, who calculated everything in terms of energy exchange and resource allocation. When David arrived, he expected a negotiation. He had prepared arguments about trade benefits and strategic advantages. He had data about how a successful star-moving operation would advance galactic technology. He never got to use any of it. The Remnari Council listened to his request for exactly 40 seconds. Then their eldest member, a towering crystal formation named Prism of Morning, raised one faceted limb. The debt is remembered, she said. Her voice was like wind chimes in a storm. 40 years ago, human miners saved 37 of our children from death in the Corel asteroid field. They did not know us. They had no reason to help. They nearly died themselves in the attempt. She paused, and light rippled through her crystalline body. The Remnari do not forget. We will send our gravity specialists. We will contribute our best technology. The debt will be honored. David stood speechless. The negotiation he had prepared for had taken less than a minute, IT was the same everywhere he went. The Hollow People, beings of living gas who existed in pressurized spheres, welcomed him to their floating cities with celebration. Their leader, a swirling mass of purple and gold, told him the story of human linguists who had spent 20 years learning to communicate with them. Before those linguists came, the galaxy had classified the Hollow People as non-sentient, animals to be harvested for their chemical properties. The humans had proven they were people. They had given them personhood. "You gave us our names," the Hollow leader said. "We will help you save your home." The Taith were warriors. They had fought humanity in a brief, brutal war 70 years ago. They had lost. David expected them to refuse, to hold grudges, to remember the humans as enemies. Instead, he met General Brada, a scarred female with one missing arm and eyes that had seen too much death. "After the war," she said, "your people could have starved us, could have enslaved us, could have done what every other conqueror in history has done." She touched the stump where her arm had once been. "Instead, you rebuilt our hospitals. Your doctors treated our wounded. Your soldiers gave blood to our dying." She stood and saluted, a gesture of respect that the Taith reserved for only the most honored allies. "The Taith will fight for you, not because we owe you, but because you showed us what honor looks like." Species after species, world after world, the coalition grew. The Kalori, whose agricultural world had been saved by human food shipments during a decade-long blight. The Mora, whose children had been rescued from slavers by human merchant captains. The Silent Ones, who communicated only through touch and had been understood first by human empaths. Each one had a story. Each one remembered. Counselor Wrath watched from the shadows of the Galactic Council. He sent reports to his superiors in the Mordane Empire, each one more alarmed than the last. "They are building an alliance," he wrote, "not through threats or bribes, but through memory. They are calling in debts that we did not know existed, favors given without thought of return, kindnesses offered without expectation of payment." He paused over his next words, uncertain if he believed them himself. Humanity has done what no conqueror could achieve. They have made the galaxy owe them, not through force, but through compassion. If they succeed in this mission, they will emerge as a power unlike any we have seen. A power built not on fear, but on gratitude. His superiors dismissed his concerns. The Mordane Empire did not believe in soft power. They believed in ships and weapons and the mathematics of destruction. They were wrong that on a small station at the edge of known space, David met with his new allies. Representatives from over 30 species gathered in a single room, united by a cause that should have been impossible. That a young Virati scientist named Tella approached him during a break in the planning sessions. She was barely an adult, born long after the plague that had nearly destroyed her species. "Ambassador Okoye," she said hesitantly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did your ancestors save us? During the Hollow Rot? We had nothing to offer. We were strangers. Your people died for us." She looked at him with large, golden eyes. "I have studied the records. There was no logical reason for the sacrifice." "So what?" David thought about the question. It was one he had asked himself many times. "I think," he said slowly, "it is because we remember what it feels like to be alone, to be afraid, to watch everything you love dying around you." He looked out the window at the stars. "We have a word for it in our oldest languages. Empathy, the ability to feel what others feel, to hurt when they hurt, to hope when they hope. But empathy is inefficient," Tella said. "It costs resources without guaranteed return." David smiled. "Yes, it does. But it also builds something that efficiency cannot buy. It builds trust. It builds friendship. It builds alliances that last for centuries." He gestured at the room full of allies. "It builds this." Tella was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think I understand. Your people are not keeping score." "No," David agreed. "We never have." Behind them, the planning continued. Ships were being assembled. Technology was being shared. 30 species were learning to work together, united by human kindness that had never expected repayment. But in the darkness between the stars, something was watching. Something ancient had felt the ripples of this gathering. Something that had slept for eons was beginning to wake, and it was not pleased. Some things are not meant to be touched. Stars are among them. They burn at temperatures that melt matter into light. They contain forces that hold planets in their grip across millions of kilometers. They are the hearts of solar systems, the engines of life, the anchors of everything that exists. And now, for the first time in galactic history, someone was trying to move one. The fleet gathered at the edge of the outer rim, in a region of space so empty that the nearest inhabited system was 40 light-years away. 3,000 ships from 30 species formed a web of metal and energy around a single yellow star. They called it Helio 7. It was young and stable and burning with the exact frequencies that Earth needed to survive. David Okoye stood on the bridge of the flagship, a massive variety vessel called Ancestor's Promise. Around him, technicians from a dozen species worked side by side, speaking in translation software, sharing data across systems that had never been designed to communicate. It was chaos. Beautiful, impossible chaos. Gravitational anchors are in position, reported a Remnari engineer, her crystalline body pulsing with data streams. The manipulation field is stable. Hollow people atmospheric processors are online, added another voice. We are ready to begin stellar cooling sequence. Taith Defense Fleet is in formation, growled General Brada from her position at the weapons station. If anything tries to interfere, we will handle it. David nodded, his heart pounding. This was it. 5 years of planning. 3 months of assembly. The combined technology of 30 civilizations, all focused on a single purpose. Begin the operation, he said. The fleet hummed with power. Gravity beams reached out and touched the star, gently, carefully, like hands cradling something precious. The star shuddered. Light rippled across its surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, impossibly, it began to move. Cheers erupted across the fleet. Species that had never spoken to each other embraced. Tears flowed from eyes of every shape and color. They were doing it. They were actually doing it. The celebration lasted exactly 4 minutes. Then the darkness spoke. That it did not come through communication channels. It did not arrive on any frequency that technology could detect. It simply appeared in the minds of every living being in the fleet, a voice that was not a voice, a presence that filled the space between thoughts. That the arrangement will not be altered, David stumbled. Around him, crew members collapsed to their knees. Some screamed. Some went silent. A hollow person's containment sphere cracked as the being inside convulsed. That returned the star. Or be unmade. What is that? Brada shouted, her warrior instincts fighting against the pressure in her skull. What is happening? Ambassador Dren's voice came through the communication system, old and strained. The Primarchs. They have awakened. The view screen flickered. Something was forming in the space ahead of them. Something that sensors could not properly read. It was not a ship. It was not a creature. It was a tear in reality itself, a wound in the fabric of existence that pulsed with colors that had no names. And it was vast, larger than planets, larger than some solar systems. It hung in the void like a god contemplating insects. What are Primarchs? David forced the words out through clenched teeth. Blood dripped from his nose, a sign of the psychic pressure crushing his mind. Beings from before, Dren answered. They existed when the universe was young. They shaped the first stars. They set the patterns that all matter follows. And then they slept, because their work was done. Until now, the voice crashed through their minds again, and this time it carried images. Galaxies being formed, stars being ignited. The birth of everything, orchestrated by entities so old that time itself was their plaything. That we created the arrangement. The stars are where they must be. Your kind does not have permission to alter our work. Ships began shutting down across the fleet. Power systems failed. Life support flickered. The Primarch was not attacking them. It was simply existing, and its existence was too much for their technology to handle. We have to retreat, someone shouted. We cannot fight this. David looked at the entity filling his view screen. He thought of Earth. He thought of his daughter's face. He thought of the flowers in his garden and the birds at his window. That he thought of the humans who had died saving the variety 2 centuries ago, when everyone else had run away. Slowly, painfully, he stood. Blood ran from his nose and ears. Every nerve in his body screamed for him to flee. Instead, he walked to the communication array and opened a channel. My name is David Okoye, he said. I am a human, from a planet called Earth. The Primarch's attention shifted. David felt it focus on him, and the weight of that attention nearly drove him to his knees. But he stayed standing. Our star is dying. Our home is going to be destroyed. We are here because we want to live. His voice cracked, but did not break. We are not asking your permission. We are asking you to understand. Silence. The terrible, crushing silence of something ancient considering something small. Then the Primarch spoke again, and this time there was something different in its voice. Not anger, not contempt, curiosity that you do not run. Your kind faces us and does not run. No, David said. Humans do not run from things that threaten our home. We never have. Interesting, the pressure in David's skull shifted. It did not disappear, but it changed, becoming less like an attack and more like an examination. Explain, the Primarch said. Explain why you believe you have the right to move what we have created. David took a deep breath. Behind him, the fleet watched. 30 species waited to see what would happen next. I will try, he said, and somewhere in the void, the oldest beings in the universe began to listen. The universe disappeared. One moment David was standing on the bridge of the flagship, surrounded by his allies and the hum of dying systems. The next moment he was somewhere else entirely. It was not a place. There was no up or down, no walls or floor. There was only light that moved like water and darkness that breathed like something alive. Colors existed that David had no words for. Sounds played that were not sounds at all, but something older, something that existed before ears were invented. He was in the mind of a god. The Primarch was everywhere around him, a presence so vast that David's human brain could barely process it. It showed him things without speaking. Images poured into his consciousness like water into a cup that was far too small that he saw the birth of galaxies. He watched stars ignite for the first time, bright and hot and hungry. He witnessed the creation of matter itself, the moment when empty space decided to become something. And through it all, he felt the Primarchs, guiding everything, shaping everything, building the universe with the patience of beings who had forever to work. This is what we created, the Presence said. The stars are not random. They are patterns, codes, each one in its place for a reason you cannot comprehend. David felt himself shrinking under the weight of this knowledge. What was one small planet compared to this? What was one dying sun compared to the grand design of everything? I understand, he said, though he was not sure if he spoke aloud or only thought the words. I understand that we are small, that our lives are brief, that in the scale of everything, we barely exist at all. He paused, gathering his courage. But that does not mean we do not matter. The Primarch's attention sharpened. Explain. You created the stars, David said. You built the framework of reality. But did you ever ask yourself why? There was a long silence. Then, the question is irrelevant. We created because creating is what we do. Is it? David felt something building inside him. Not anger, not defiance, something else. You shaped the universe, but you never lived in it. You never felt what it means to be small and afraid and still choose to help someone smaller and more afraid. He reached into his own memories. Not the diplomatic training, not the careful arguments he had prepared. Something deeper. He showed the Primarch his grandmother, a woman who had survived poverty and war and loss, a woman who had given her food to hungry neighbors even when she had nothing left, a woman who had died with nothing material but had been mourned by an entire community. He showed it the 18 humans who had died on the Verati homeworld. Not statistics, not numbers. People. Dr. Lena Okoye, who had known the cure would kill her and had synthesized it anyway. Nurse Thomas Bell, who had carried infected children to safety until his own body gave out. Scientist Maria Santos, who had worked for 60 hours straight until her heart stopped. He showed it the small kindnesses. A human soldier giving water to a dying enemy. Strangers forming a chain in floodwater to save people they had never met. A child sharing food with a stray animal that he showed at the coalition. 30 species, working together not because they had to, but because they remembered being helped. This is chaos, the Primarch said. Inefficiency. Disorder. Yes, David agreed. It is all of those things. It is messy and illogical and wasteful. He looked into the vast presence surrounding him. But it is also beautiful. It is the only thing that makes the universe worth having. The Primarch was silent for a long time. Other presences gathered at the edges of David's awareness. More Primarchs, awakened by the disturbance, watching this strange conversation between God and mortal. One of your kind gave her life to save strangers, the lead pre-march finally said. David saw the image it was examining. Dr. Lena Okoye, holding a Verati child while the hollow rot consumed her from inside. She knew she would die. She did it anyway. Yes. Why? David thought about the question. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about his daughter. He thought about every human who had ever reached out a hand to someone in need. Because that is what we do, he said. Not because it is logical, not because we expect reward, but because when we see suffering, something inside us breaks unless we try to help. He met the Primarch's attention directly, a tiny spark facing an infinite fire. You built the stars, but we give them meaning. Without us, without life, without beings who love and suffer and sacrifice, the universe is just cold mathematics. We are the part of your creation that looks up at the sky and feels wonder. We are the part that creates art and music and stories. We are the part that matters. The Primarchs debated. David felt their ancient arguments swirling around him, concepts older than planets being exchanged faster than thought. Some wanted to destroy the fleet. These small creatures had touched what should not be touched. They had disturbed the sleepers. They deserved ending. Others were curious. In billions of years, they had never encountered anything quite like humanity. Beings who defied logic, who valued disorder, who found meaning in meaninglessness. The lead pre-march reached a decision that we will allow this. David felt a wave of relief wash through him. But the presence was not finished, but know that we will be watching. Always. Your kind is dangerous. Not because you are strong. Because you are strange. The mindscape began to fade. David felt himself being pushed back toward reality that when humans collect a favor, the pre-march said, its voice echoing across dimensions, even we shudder to imagine what comes next. David opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor of the bridge, surrounded by concerned faces. Ambassador Dren knelt beside him, ancient hands checking for injuries. What happened? Brada demanded. The pre-march just left. It disappeared. David sat up slowly. His entire body ached. His mind felt stretched, like a muscle that had been pushed too far. We have permission, he said. They are going to let us move the star. Cheers erupted again, louder than before. But David did not celebrate. He was thinking about what the pre-march had said, that we will be watching. Always, humanity had won this battle. But something told David that this was only the beginning. The universe had noticed them now. Gods and monsters and beings of impossible power knew their name. And for better or worse, nothing would ever be the same. 40 years is not a long time for a star, but it is a lifetime for a child. The girl who had once asked about flowers and birds had grown into a woman. Her name was Amara Okoye, and she stood in her father's garden on a spring morning, watching the sunrise. But it was not the same sun she had been born under. New soul hung in the sky, yellow and warm and steady. It was slightly different from the old sun. The light had a golden quality that the original had never possessed. The shadows fell at slightly different angles. Scientists said it would take centuries for Earth's ecosystems to fully adapt, but adaptation was something humans understood. Amara heard footsteps behind her. Her father walked slowly now, his hair completely gray, his body bent with age. But his eyes were still sharp, still carrying the weight of everything he had seen. Beautiful morning, David said, settling into a chair beside her. Every morning is beautiful now. Amara smiled at him. Thanks to you. David shook his head. Not thanks to me. Thanks to 30 species who remembered kindness. Thanks to beings older than time who chose mercy over judgment. Thanks to everyone who believed the impossible was worth attempting. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the new sun climb higher. Somewhere in the garden, birds sang. They had adapted to the slightly different light faster than anyone expected. The ceremony is today, Amara said eventually. The 40th anniversary. Ambassador Dren is coming. David's face softened. He is still alive? Barely. His doctors say this will probably be his last trip off-world. Amara hesitated. He asked specifically to see you. David nodded slowly. He had not seen Dren in 5 years. The old Verati had retired from diplomatic service, content to watch from a distance as the galaxy changed around him. The ceremony was held in the plaza where the original announcement had been made 40 years ago. The plaza where David had told the world that their son was dying. The plaza where panic had nearly torn civilization apart, before hope took hold instead. Now it was filled with representatives from every species in the coalition. Varadi and Remnari, Taith and Hollow People, Kalori and Mora, and dozens of others. They stood together under a sun they had helped place in the sky, united by bonds that had only grown stronger over 4 decades. Ambassador Dren arrived in a hovering chair, too weak to walk. But when he saw David, he insisted on standing. His old body trembled with the effort, but his voice was steady. "My friend," he said, embracing the human carefully. "We did it. We did it," David agreed. "Because of you. Because you honored a debt that most species would have forgotten." Dren waved a scaled hand dismissively. "The debt was easy. What your ancestor did, what those 18 humans sacrificed, that was difficult." He looked up at the new sun. "This is just repayment. Long overdue." David gave his speech to the assembled crowd. He spoke of sacrifice and cooperation. He spoke of the coalition and the Primarchs. He spoke of a universe that was larger and stranger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. But mostly, he spoke of kindness. 40 years ago, he said, we asked the galaxy for help. We called in debts we did not know we had earned. And the galaxy answered. He paused, looking at the faces before him. So many species, so many different kinds of life, all united under a star that should not exist. We learned something important in those years. Power is not measured in weapons or territory or the ability to destroy. Power is measured in the willingness to help, in the hands extended without expectation of return, in the small acts of mercy that echo across centuries. He looked at Ambassador Dren, ancient and fading but still present. The Varadi remembered what we did for them 200 years ago. They remembered, and because they remembered, Earth still exists. My daughter stands under a new sun because of a debt that my ancestors never expected to collect. He turned back to the crowd. So I leave you with this thought. Be kind. Be generous. Help those who cannot help themselves, even when it costs you, even when you receive nothing in return. Because you never know when that kindness will come back to you. You never know when the favor you granted will be the favor that saves your world. The crowd applauded. Species that had been strangers 40 years ago embraced. Old enemies stood together as friends. Later, as the celebration continued, David found a quiet moment with his daughter. They stood at the edge of the plaza, looking up at the sky. "Father," Amara said, "what did the pre-march really say to you? In that place between minds?" David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "It told me that we are dangerous. Not because we are strong, but because we are strange. Because we do things that do not make sense. Because we love and sacrifice and hope in defiance of all logic." "Is that a bad thing?" David smiled. "I do not think so. I think it is the best thing about us." He put an arm around his daughter. "The universe is vast and cold and mostly empty. But we fill it with meaning. We connect. We care. And that scares beings who have never understood why anything should matter." A young Varadi child approached them, barely old enough to speak. She looked up at David with large golden eyes. "Is it true," she asked, "that humans saved my people? Before you needed anything from us?" David knelt to meet her eyes. "Yes, it is true. Why did you do it?" David thought of his grandmother. He thought of Dr. Lena Okoye. He thought of 18 humans who had died for strangers. He thought of all the small kindnesses that had added up to something extraordinary. "Because that is what good neighbors do," he said. "And now we are even. Until the next time one of us needs help." The child nodded, understanding something that words could not fully capture, that I in the void between galaxies, far beyond the reach of any ship, the Primarchs watched. They had been observing humanity for 40 years now, fascinated by these small, brief, illogical creatures. The oldest among them stirred. "They moved a star," it said to its kin. "And they did it not through conquest, but through kindness. They turned debts into alliances and memories into power. They are dangerous," another replied. "Yes, but also beautiful. In all our ages of existence, we have never created anything like them." The Primarchs contemplated this in silence. Then the oldest spoke again, its voice echoing across dimensions that humanity would never perceive. "Watch them," it said. "For when humans collect a favor, even stars shudder. And when they grant one." It paused, considering a universe filled with small acts of mercy, each one rippling outward forever. Universes are born. On Earth, under a new sun, children played in parks and gardens bloomed. They did not know that gods had once considered destroying them. They did not know that their survival had changed the course of cosmic history. They only knew that the sun was warm, the sky was blue, and somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, they had friends, and that was enough.